Welcome, everyone, to the latest installment of the Indie Initiative from Insider Gaming. I'm your host, Mike Straw, and this week we are joined by the developer of Patch Quest, Liam. Liam, thank you so much for taking the time out of what I assume is a busy schedule of yours to join me here this week.
Yeah, no problem.
So, for those who don't know what Patch Quest is, could you give a quick, maybe 30-second rundown of what the game is?
Sure. It's kind of like The Binding of Isaac crossed with Pokemon. So it's a top-down twin-stick shooter action roguelike game, but the twist is that you can mount and ride all of the enemies in the game, which are all monsters. When you're riding the monster, you can use all of its skills in combat. And the other twist is that there's a big maze-like Metroidvania-inspired overworld to explore with lots of habitats and lots of monsters to find.
What was the inspiration behind it? Obviously, you said Binding of Isaac, and when you brought up Binding of Isaac, and when I saw it and like reading on that, Binding of Isaac is one of my favorite games of all time. Like, I've been playing it for 10 years now. Like, it's just fantastic. So this just kind of fit into my alley, especially being a big Pokemon fan as well. But was that always kind of what you decided or what you wanted the inspiration behind this game to be? Or how did that come about to get two completely different types of like game styles and things like that into this package?
It's kind of funny, actually. I've been working on the game for a really long time. What I basically did was I finished my degree and then I was like, all right, that's it. I want to try and make a video game and, you know, have a backup plan of maybe getting a real job. So I jumped into it. I had to learn a lot of skills. I mean, I'd always sort of done hobbyist game development when I was in high school and stuff, but nothing serious. And I sort of just jumped in. I was like, oh crap, this is complicated. Had to learn a bunch of different skills to get anywhere. And for the first few years of development, I was just sort of piecing together random ideas that I had. And my game actually didn't really gel. It didn't really come together into something fun. And so I had this period where I sat down and I was like, what do I really want to make? What do I really want to draw inspiration from? And I sort of rebooted development and I said, you know, there's a lot of these fun action roguelike games coming out, The Binding of Isaac, Enter the Gungeon, you know, games like that at the time that were coming out. And I was like, I really want to make something like that that's just juicy and fun and quick to get into, easy to pick up and put down, you know. And I also knew that, you know, with the genre expanding, it really needed a twist.
Yeah.
And I've made a handful of, you know, cool little monster designs, and I thought, how better to use them than letting you use them as power-ups, right? Because a big thing about roguelike games is the power-up system. And I thought it would be cool if the enemies were the power-ups. You can mount them, ride them, and then use their abilities.
How did that work when you were building? Like, did it come together once you hit that point of that's what you wanted? Did it kind of gel like right away, mesh together, or was there how much trial and error came to actually getting that to work?
Getting it to work really well took a lot of trial and error, but it did also sort of really start to come together at that point where I was like, simplify, make it a roguelike, make it actiony, lots of dodging and shooting, and throw in the monster power-ups. But then the nuance was in, you know, if you're able to ride the enemy and use their attacks, that means there has to be a lot of symmetry in the abilities that the monsters use, right? Every ability has to be usable by you against monsters and by monsters against you. And it's got to feel good when you're using it, but it's got to be fair when they're using it, right? So, for example, there was an enemy that could roar, and the roar would like stun the monsters around you. So it was cool when you use it, like, oh, I'm in trouble, I'll just roar, I'll stun everything. Then you try playing against that, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm just getting stunned from across the room. All this random, you know, it felt awful. So there was a lot of trial and error and in the nuance of getting this to be really fun and balanced and fair.
So obviously you said the game was in development for a while. It came out in early access, if I recall, back in 2021, correct? 2 years ago.
So yeah.
And then it just released V1 fully last month. Is it, when you see where the game was, even just from the early access launch to full launch, what has been your biggest takeaway of what you've been able to accomplish or change or update?
It's been amazing. It really has grown a lot. And I think most of that growth can be attributed, at least in part, to the community that I've really tried to build up in Discord and on YouTube. I've because I'm developing the game by myself, I don't have a team of
Yeah.
designers and programmers to help me. I needed another way of sort of bouncing ideas around, and that's why having a community, having all these people who play the game and want to give their thoughts on it, I've been able to integrate a huge amount of feedback over a really long time to get the game to a really nice level of polish. You know, people will pick up on small little things that I never considered. And, you know, a lot of the time I can't do anything about it, but sometimes you can. And there's little tweaks of what really makes the game come together. And so, yeah, it's been like a real long journey, but a gradual journey as well of just it's slowly coming more and more together. And I guess that's what's kept me motivated through it.
Being a solo developer, obviously you have to worry about the art design. You have to worry about the sound. You got to worry about literally every aspect. Was there ever a point in this where it might have felt like it was getting to be too much, too overwhelming? Because I don't think people understand as much as they think they do what goes into it, especially when you're by yourself.
Mhm. Yeah, actually, that happened quite a bit, to be honest. There was definitely like a cycle I went through of, oh, I'm really excited. I'm adding new fun things to the game. It's better than it was a week ago. And then you go through another cycle of, oh, you know, this is taking so long. There's so much left to do. Am I really going to finish it? It's kind of a back and a forth sort of, you know, like the cartoons with the two little angels on your shoulder
Yeah.
of like, oh, I want to do this. It's so much fun. Oh, but can I do this? Can I finish it? Um, for me, where it really sort of the turning point for me was when I started showing it to people, started building a community, and that accountability of showing lots of people, getting lots of feedback really helped. Let me know first of all that I was on track to actually make a game people enjoyed, but also made me just enjoy the process more of incrementally improving it because I would get that little bit of feedback each time, each day that I did something.
So how, I mean, probably goes without saying, but how important was the community, like that growth and just getting that was, do you think without the community being able to give you that feedback, the game would have ever gotten to the point it is?
Probably not, honestly. Like it, I mean, part of it is that if you haven't really promised something to people, it's easy to give up on it.
Yeah.
If you've never really, if you know, if you're just like, oh, I want to do all these cool things and meet all these goals, but you just keep them to yourself, you never tell anyone. You then there's no impetus to like really keep going when it gets tough. And so I think that you know, building up a community was so essential in so many ways. First of all, getting the feedback, improving the game, making the game actually better than it otherwise would have been. And then secondly, keeping the motivation to keep going and just, you know, feeling excited about it as well. The community was essential.
I mean, the game has been picked up by some and reviewed by some high level outlets like PC Gamer and things like that. When you saw that your game had that type of interest publicly, what did that do to you? Did that kind of give you vindication or validation on what you did? Did it show you that, you know what, I have the talent to make this my career? Like what was that feeling like when you saw, like, not only was your game being played by like just a community that you've helped build, but now you're getting reviewed, you're getting seen, you're getting played by these outlets who just that obviously they, speaking from experience, we're bombarded with games all the time. This
Mm-hmm.
is an industry that's constantly growing. It's easier than ever to get into, harder than ever to get noticed.
Yeah.
How did that feeling happen when you started to see your game get noticed, not just by your community that you had been built?
It was a big feeling of sort of relief, I guess, like having worked on it for so long, put so much of my energy and effort into it for years, literally since I left university, like 7 years ago. You know, been like, oh, I'm going to make this game, you know, ups and downs. Oh, I'm going to reboot the game. I'm going to, you
Yeah.
know, get ideas. I'm going to rework this and that. And hopefully it's all going to come together in the end. And, you know, big marathon sort of trek to get it done. And so seeing it sort of get some traction, you know, not just within my bubble, but outside of it, felt very relieving. Like I actually, you know, it's actually doing well or well enough, at least I can actually keep doing this. I can make more games in the future. And that's, yeah, it has been nice, to be honest. It's been sort of, it's changed my mindset from just I've got to get this game done at all costs and hope it goes well, to more like, this can be my career. This can be something I can make more games, hopefully faster than the last one with all the experience I now have. But
Yeah.
I can keep going.
Was game development something you always wanted to do, or was it a situation of, let's see if I can do it? What did you like, for like a bit of a background behind you? What did you go to university for and things like that?
Yeah, I'd always wanted to make games. I mean, it's like when I was really young, I was like, oh, I want to be an animator. I want to make like movies and cartoons and stuff. And then as I got a bit older, maybe like 10, I'm like, no, I actually want to make video games. But at that age, it kind of seems impossible. It's just something that you think to yourself, like, oh, when I'm a grown up, I'll know how to do this. It'll come together. I got to like sort of age 14, 15, I was like, okay, it's not just going to happen magically. If I want to make games, I'm going to have to learn how. So I picked up Game Maker, which is an engine, lesser known one that's really aimed at beginners. And from there, just got the basics.
Game Maker, for those that don't know, one of the great, now again, this is my opinion, but one of the greatest games ever made, Undertale, was made in Game Maker. So
yeah, so was Hyper Light Drifter as well.
Yeah,
so
I think
you can
Hotline Miami, the first one was Hotline Miami, was made in as well.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, one thing that connects all of those is that they are 2D sort of pixel art games. Like, there are limitations to the engine, but limitations breed creativity, right? So just because you're using a quote unquote simple engine doesn't mean that you can't make something amazing. So yeah, I wanted to make games, and I was doing it as a hobbyist level as a teenager, and then I went to study computer science at university, thinking like, oh, I don't know if I really want to do this. Like, I hear it's a difficult industry, a lot of crunching, difficult to find jobs, difficult to make successful games. But if I learn programming, then I could get a variety of jobs. So that was kind of the mindset I had. And then at uni, I did some internships and things, and I was like, yeah, it's okay working in a tech company. There's definitely perks to it, but it sort of reinforced the idea in me that I wanted to be creative. I wanted to create something, and so kind of lit a fire under me when I left to learn how to make a real game, a proper one.
When you were getting started on that point, what was the biggest, I don't want to say hurdle or obstacle, but maybe the biggest surprise as to what it took to actually develop? Was it the art? Was it just getting things to work properly? All the different aspects of working within an engine? What would you pinpoint as like the biggest learning curve, I guess, or steepest?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think actually that all of the sort of sub disciplines, so if you've got to make art, you've got to make programming, you got to do level design and all these other things, each of those individually wasn't so difficult. I mean, they were difficult, and programming was the hardest of all of them.
Yeah.
And and it's like, an artist never like reaches a point where it's like, oh, I can't make any better art than I've just made. It's impossible, right? There's always more. You can always improve at these things. But I think actually the biggest learning curve and the hardest one to get right was pulling all of that together. Because it's one thing to be like, oh, I have code and I have art, but they have to match. They have to feel like they're part of a whole. And the design of the game itself also has to feel cohesive. It has to be fun, but also simple. It has to be something that people resonate with on an emotional level, but then also on like a technical level of, oh, there's a lot of tactics and strategy in this. And so the pulling together of a fun game from all the different sub disciplines was really the hard part, and it's still something that I'm really trying to get a lot better at, to be honest.
So with Patch Quest specifically, one of the things you mentioned being what it is the ability to quickly get in, play, figure it out, and just have a good time. That's what a lot of these roguelike and roguelike games do.
Mm-hmm.
How, when you're building out, what kind of obstacles did you have to deal with to make sure the game wasn't too deep? Because at the end of the day, it should be a deep game from a content standpoint, but simple enough for the average 9 to 5er to come home, load up, and play without having to do too much. So were there any instances of you when you're developing going, okay, I have to take that out because that might be a little bit too much for what I'm going for?
Yeah, the way I would phrase it is it's not so much depth that's the problem, it's breadth, right? The other dimension of you've got all these different mechanics and you've got to learn all of them, a very wide game, right?
Yeah.
Think about something like League of Legends. That's a deep game, but it's also an incredibly wide game of there's 100 different heroes and they all do different wacky things. You've got to learn all of them. Whereas if you think of something like chess, that's a very narrow game. There's only 6 different pieces, but then it's incredibly deep from those pieces. And so, you know, depth is always a nice thing, I think. But the challenge was not making the game too broad, not like knowing when to edit out ideas, knowing when to say, yeah, this would be cool, but I'm already doing 3 other things here. And if I do all of them, it's going to be a mess. People are not going to understand which one's more important. You know, what really matters. And so I went through a lot of iteration, and that's also where the community helped of like, you know, helping me. Like, people always want you to make the game broader, like add this, add that. But people can also give ideas of like, well, here's what really matters. Here's the crux of it. And I think a good example of all of this is with the game's blaster that you have. It has a bunch of different modes. It has the normal mode, you shoot automatic as you hold down the trigger, but then it charges up, and when it's fully charged, you can release a charge blast, which is a super powerful one, and then it drains. And that's sort of like a reload mechanic and an alternate fire mechanic put together, sort of like a heat meter that fills up, and then you do an alternate fire and then a reload. So it was a bunch of different ideas that were thrown together, but it happens on one button. And then similarly, you can also melee blast, which is another kind of alternate fire that you do automatically if you shoot something when you're right next to it. So you had this normal fire, alternate charge fire, alternate melee fire, and a reload system and a heat system, all contained on one button. And that's the kind of thing that I really tried to sort of move towards over time of like, you don't want to, if you're going to have all these features, they've got to come together in a simple way.
When you're playing the game, what is the feature that ultimately you're most proud of that you were able to actually implement?
It's definitely the monster riding.
Was it a case of just like, this is just fun to do because of the different options, or was it a case of was it because of like difficulty? What makes it like your favorite part?
Yeah, well, so what's cool about the monster riding is, first of all, that it's just fun. It's fun to try out all these different abilities, to just be like, oh, I've never seen this guy before. Let's jump on him and use his stuff. But also it was pretty technically challenging to design, because there's over 50 different species, and then there are subspecies as well, which brings it to over 70 different monsters in the game. And they all have different variations of skills. So it was quite technically challenging to make all these skills and balance them. And then also sort of linked in really nicely with the lasso that you have, because a lasso is something that you spin around in circles and then throw at a bull, right? And so I tried to implement that circle idea where you throw it around and then you latch onto a monster, and then to mount it, you have to go around it in a circle. And if you get hit while you're doing that, you detach and you fail the mount. So there's this risk reward element of, I want to mount the monster, but there's other monsters in the room and they're all shooting. Should I defeat them first, or should I just YOLO it and, you know, dodge all the bullets and take the monster? So there's a lot of different threads that pull into it, but I think it's just fun and simple and juicy, and there's a huge amount of variety, and it was very difficult to pull off on the scale that I did. So that's why I think it's my favorite feature.
How long did it take from a development standpoint to get it to where you want it? Was it something that took most of the time? How long from when you, if you can recall, when you started it to getting it to where you were happy?
I think it probably took close to a third of the total development time after the reboot to do it, because you got to remember, I'm also adding the monsters as enemies as well, and so they're the main enemy in the game and the main power up in the game, and then you've got to tweak the mechanics to make sure that they feel right, and you've got to balance them all. I reckon it was a third of all the development time was spent on that feature.
So with Patch Quest, the Steam reviews have been through the roof, overwhelmingly positive. people are enjoying the game. There's streamers playing it, YouTube videos about it. What does that give you as far as motivation or inspiration for the future of whether it's this game itself, future updates to it, or another game that you want to build? What does that do for your confidence level?
Yeah, it's been really great to see people playing the game and to see it get picked up by so many people, and it has motivated me to do 2 more post-launch updates, one in the summer, one in the autumn. So there's going to be another roughly 6 months of development into the game that I'm going to do, and then I'm going to see what happens from there. But I'm also keen. I can't confirm anything like this yet, but we're keen with my publisher looking into possibility of getting it on consoles or doing other sorts of things with it, which would be great. So yeah, it's really made me feel like I want to do this game justice. I want to finish it as well as I possibly can. But it also has given me the confidence to say, like, yeah, I can make some more games, and I want to make some simpler games after Patch Quest. Like I love that I've been able to throw all this content into the game, but also from the perspective of being a solo developer and needing to stay sane.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and make some simpler stuff next time around and make it faster, make more games, and build things from there.
When I do these interviews and I talk to people, especially solo developers, sometimes one of the biggest things is they don't want to get pigeonholed into this is the type of game they build.
Mm-hmm.
So now that you have a roguelike game out, is that something you find yourself maybe struggling with, of like, well, now because I built this type of game, I have to stick in this genre, this style? Or are you hoping to expand on the types of games you're able to make?
Yeah, I wanna definitely expand. I feel like I've really done as much with this game as I can to a certain, like, there's still some more I want to add, but once that's all in, I kind of feel like I'll have made the game I wanted to make. Yeah. And if I made another action roguelike game, it's like how much more can I really do with all the monsters, all the habitats, all the stuff that's in this game, boss battles. I feel like if I really want to stretch myself and just have fun and make something that's interesting and not just a copy of what I've already made, then branching into totally different genres is really what I want to do.
As we wrap this up, is there anything with Patch Quest that maybe surprised you as to how, like, whether it's the feedback from fans or how it actually ultimately worked? Anything that even you were surprised when the game was out the door?
Yeah, there's been, it's a minority of the total player base, obviously, but there's been some people who tell me, like, this is my favorite game ever. It's great. I've played it for like 100 hours or, longer than that even. And I'm just sitting there thinking, like, wow, I mean, I always wanted to make like a fun, simple, juicy game, but that kind of feedback just sort of blew me away because I never thought anyone would actually say that. So yeah, even though it's not everyone, obviously, but even just hearing it from a few people, that's been really amazing.
Patch Quest is out now. It is available on Steam. Obviously, you talked about the idea of potentially bringing it over to other consoles. I'm just saying it's made for Nintendo Switch. We all know how Nintendo can be with ports, but if you don't end up porting it, are you honestly like, what is your honest opinion about, like, your just happiness level with how the game's development went, how the launch has gone, and how the feedback and how the community has grown since its 1.0 release? Like, if you were to like sum it up into one sentence, like your overall feelings right now.
I'm just super pleased, super happy with how it's all gone, and super relieved that it's worked out in the end. I think that if I did it all again, I'd maybe set my scope smaller, try something simpler. But this is the game that I made, and I'm really happy with it.
But again, thank you so much for taking the time here. It's been fantastic. And tell everybody where they can follow you for more information on Patch Quest.
Yeah, the best place to follow me is the Discord server. That's where I'm active every day, or every work day at least. And next best place is the YouTube channel. It's, I used to put up more videos than I have recently, but once Patch Quest development is fully done, I'll be back to making a lot more videos. So the YouTube channel is also a great place.
And both will be in the description below, both links. Again, Liam, thank you so much. Make sure, everybody, you check out Patch Quest as soon as you can. Thank you for tuning into the Indie Initiative. We'll see you next week for the next installment.